Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as AdamsRib, and you are listening to the Smart Black Girls Club podcast. So, for the past year, I have been discussing 11 months of Black history. And that is out of support for those who want to make Black history a regular part of school curriculums and not only restricted to 1 month, and the shortest month of the year at that, which is kind of indicative of how Black people kind of get done in this country sometimes. So I'm in support of it, but I'm also in support. I'm in support of it, but I'm also in support of placing an extra emphasis on Black History Month as Black History Month. So I don't want to completely get rid of, let me see here. I don't want to completely get rid of Black History Month being Black History Month. I just would like a special emphasis on it around that time of year. And then, continue to have it be part of the regular school curriculum. So because I got a late start, I didn't really get started until February, I decided to have 11 months of Black history. So there's several themes going on with my celebration. One of them is, 11 months of Black history, of course. We also had an anniversary this year. Hip hop turned 50. Now, if you're wondering why that is so important, so in order to figure out why that is so important, we have to draw a few parallels between hip hop and rock and roll. So hip hop is not the first Black originated music medium. There was a Black originated Black medium that came before us, and that was rock and roll. So rock and roll was another medium that was originated by us. That, now when we think about rock, we tend to think of white males and, people trashing hotel rooms and anarchy and all kinds of other stuff and rebellion, but it wasn't always that way. Rock was actually started. The early architects of rock and roll were Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Chuck Berry, Little Richard. I'm looking forward to seeing this Little Richard film that's out right now, as well as others. Fats Domino. The list goes on. I remember at one point in the 80s, they were interviewing Little Richard, and Little Richard laid claim for a whole lot of artists. He said Prince is him, Michael Jackson is him, and he named a whole lot of artists. And if I could, extend that, RuPaul is him, Sylvester was him. People are giving Sylvester a whole lot of credit for gender bending, different norms and what they call, trying to figure out the word, but, rock has always given men, and before that, some classic forms of classical music, but rock has always gave men the ability to gender bend, and be able to dress in ways that most men outside of the form of rock would be able to do. So I've also, so hip hop, happy anniversary to hip hop is also a theme that I'm going to be celebrating. I've been a hip hop fan since day one. I really like it. I'm a day oneer with it. I haven't always liked some of the children that have sprung forth out of hip hop, but as a musical form, I have always been pro hip hop. I'm not always, and one of the things I will be discussing this year is misogyny in hip hop. So while we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go. I also, I've also been talking about Black feminism because there are people who don't think that Black women had any place in the fight for equal rights for women. And I hope to demonstrate that actually we were there. We have not always obeyed the rules and stayed in our place. And when I say stay in our place, I mean that with air quotes. Stay in our place. And it's been a good thing we haven't stayed in our place. Because if we stayed in our place, some of us would still be on a plantation. Many of us, we would still be on a plantation. So at some point, it pays to not always have to stay in your place. It can be dangerous because people who are used to asserting a certain type of power over you don't always take lightly to you upsetting that apple cart if they've always had that type of power. If they've always had the power or always felt like you need their approval to do things like breathe, there's a bit of a rebuff toward you deciding to do you want to do more than breathe. And so this is actually my second my recording with this podcast. I had another one that was perfectly cool that I wound up getting a case of cotton mouth and wound up having to stop it and come back. But I was also making the point that if you really want to find out how people feel about you, finding out that you possess a car that they don't think you should be driving. Now, people will say, well, they think you stole it. They don't think you stole it. Like, how many different times can you wear out that same excuse? And I watched an old episode of Sanford and Son that I thought was so interesting because I think it was Fred got hit by a white man driving a Cadillac. And because it was a white man driving a Cadillac, he knew his payday was in the glory, right? He knew this was somebody that had a lot of money and that he was going to get some money. And then he found out that the car was stolen and that the person driving the car was a car thief. So guess what that does to anything that he thinks he's going to get, because they're not going to hold the owner of the car responsible since they weren't driving, the car was stolen. I know we have to live through a lot. And while we've come a long way, which is one of the reasons I do the notables, but I've been doing the notables on my little slideshow through Ripple, which is not working right now at this time. So I have to find another way to do it. But the bottom line, I just thought of a medium to do it through, some cool. But I do the notables, but I've also been addressing issues that affect the Black community. Some of them fall under the category of we need to do better. Some of them fall under the category of we need to continue the fight of faith. Okay? So, the one issue that I want to talk about today, and is calling someone a Oreo. So let me get in here. So to get some definition, here. First of all, we pretty much know what an Oreo is. An Oreo is a brand of sandwich cookie that consists of 2 chocolate biscuits or cookie pieces and a sweet cream filling. Been around since March 6, 1912. And through a series of corporate acquisitions, mergers, and splits, both Nabisco and the Oreo brand has since come to be owned by Mondelez International since 2012. Available in over 100 countries, and many different varieties have been produced. Now, let's get to why I want to talk about Oreos. So, use of Oreo as a slur. Oreos, due to their almost black cookies and white fillings, have often been used in popular culture as a metaphor for relations between people of color and white people. So the term Oreo has occasionally been used as a racial slur aimed at a person of mixed race, I didn't know this, or African American heritage who is accused of trying to act white. So in the United States, acting white is a pejorative term usually applied to black people and usually refers to a person's perceived portrayal of their culture by assuming the social expectations of white society. It can also be applied to success in education, although this view is highly debated. In 2020, 93.6% of African Americans between 25 and 39 had a high school diploma, on par with the national average. It's a very controversial term, acting white is, and its precise meaning is hard to define. It is theorized by some minority students are discouraged from achieving in school by the negative prejudices of ethnic peers. Such a view has been expressed in articles in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, and by public figures and academics across the political spectrum. So back to Oreo. The insult may be levied as an accusation that the person perpetuates the unlevel playing field for blacks, and is based on the implication that the person, like the cookie, is black on the outside and white on the inside. For example, the protagonist of the 1974 novel Oreo was nicknamed Oreo because of a mixed Jewish American and African American heritage. Former President Obama, due to his biracial heritage, has been compared to an Oreo by political pundits, TV personalities such as John McLaughlin and Rush Limbaugh. Oh, God. He must listen to me. If Rush Limbaugh was calling you an Oreo, that means you're doing the right thing. Okay? For real. And I'll tell you why in a minute. In 2021, the chair of the Lamar County Democrats, Gary O'Connor, compared Tim Scott, South Carolina senator, the only African American Republican, in the United States, to an Oreo after Scott gave the Republican response to Joe Biden's joint address. I don't want to get into any other people. So, addressed to Congress. Amidst fierce criticism, O'Connor apologized for his remarks. Yeah, because that's a really sensitive word in our community. And I'm trying to get us to divorce calling each other Oreo, much less, people outside trying to call us Oreo because they're not applying it right and we don't apply it right. So, oftentimes, and I have said this myself, I recently had somebody throw the Oreo insult at me. And it was because they couldn't talk me into prostituting myself. I am not a prostitute. Never want to be one. And so I have said my own self, I've never heard a black person call another black person an Oreo and have them have good intentions. So for me, I don't really like the term Oreo because in my experience, it was usually another black person trying to talk me into something that was very detrimental to me. Like it was, and it's a term that I haven't heard since I was a teenager. And so when I was younger, when someone was saying that to you, they were usually trying to talk you into doing something like shoplifting or, smoking joints or whatever. It was usually an attempt to manipulate. It was usually an attempt to talk you into something that was against your own best interest. Now, I personally don't, I find the term very racist. And I find it racist because it is really steeped in the age-old stereotype of black people being inferior and being allergic to success. And it's a term that goes all the way back to the plantation. Okay, it's really another way to get you to do a whole bunch of stuff that goes against your best interest. Okay, it really is. And many times the people who are talking you into something may not even be into that behavior themselves. They're just trying to see how quickly they can drag you down. I have yet to hear anybody call, and a white person calling you an Oreo really steams me because it's just like a white person calling you the N-word. This is something that your people made up. This is a standard, this is a stereotype that originates with white people. I remember when Oprah had her show and someone was saying, well, what is the difference between us saying it and y'all saying it? And Oprah so eloquently said, because when you all say it, it musters up images of white sheets, burning crosses, bombed churches, bombed schools, 4 little black girls getting murdered, a 14-year-old teenager being murdered for a wolf whistle that he may or may not, and now we're finding out that she lied, so he didn't do it. Okay. It is another way of weaponizing whiteness. So it's not, and since the reason I was being criticized for it was because this person's church wanted to be able to pass me around sexually. So it was really a term that was meant to manipulate me into doing some things sexually. It accompanied some sexual harassment. Once again, we still have black people weaponizing terms like this, and it's really another way to shame you or make you feel inferior for being black. Okay, and it's not a good term. Now, like they said before, the whole mixed heritage thing, I don't really consider that to be, you cannot help who gets together and decides to form you as a person. Because there are many people who probably wish some different people had came together to make them. And not just on a racial term, but just on the way they've been treated by the biological parents that they have. There are people who probably wish some different people had came together and make them. I certainly don't believe that our forever president and forever first lady fit that description. And really, it's another way for punishing you. It's another way to punish you for wanting a good life. So on my draft that I wound up having to throw away, I talked about black people driving nice cars.
Unknown caller.
I talked about black people driving nice cars. Sorry about that. I'm recording this on my iPhone. And how there are people who, that in the past has often been used as an excuse to profile us and pull us over. Because the standard company line was, well, we thought he or she fit the description, so therefore we pulled him over. In other words, racial profiling. An excuse to profile us, which means an excuse to pull us over. And recently I had to say, it's not because they thought you were, because plenty, I just said earlier about the episode of Sanford and Son, where they found out that that the car was stolen by a white guy. So plenty of white people steal cars all the time, and they don't get profiled for it and don't get pulled over for it. The real implication behind behavior like that is that you don't deserve to be driving a nice car. Okay. And the term Oreo goes into that same thing. You are a black person that carries yourself with confidence, that speaks well, that speaks proper English. I've heard black people get called Oreos for speaking proper English, which I think is funny because you speaking proper English is a sign that your teacher did a good job teaching you. People, African American vernacular, which is a mixture of slang. So there's already a term for that. It's called slang. There's also, bad grammar, which I don't think belongs exclusively to any one group. So, like I said before, I haven't heard anyone called an Oreo in a very long time, because I thought, you every time you think that you have grown as a culture and as a people past certain things, somebody will say something and you go, well, not all of us. Some of us are still needing to come up. Like I said, when someone said it to me and then continued to keep pushing the point, and these are other black people. These are other black people doing this. And I think it's interesting, like I said before, and not only are they other black people, but they're other black people that have been college educated, that fit the very description of what they say an Oreo is. Right. Now, I know that it's only being said because of my stance on saving sex for marriage. Okay? Because, that's what white churches do. Last time I looked, black churches were under the same Jesus Christ. Wow. The last time I looked, black churches and white churches were supposed to be serving the same Savior. So I never understood, so I don't really understand that. And I remember when I first started going to the church that is responsible for all these attacks and all this persecution, one of the things the Holy Spirit said to me was, you're being attacked by the same spirit that says you're not black enough, only now you're not saved enough. Now, I ain't worried about it because people like that have never previously had the power to really do anything to me. Okay? And the one way that I coped over black bullying and white bullying, because they're being joined by some white people, was to go ahead and, dig my heels in, resist, said demon, and continue to keep going forward. Well, they're starting to assume more. They're not winning, but they're starting to try to assume even more power. Because when you're younger, the prize is, not that big, because you'll change friends. You'll find other people to hang out with and different other stuff like that. I'm going to have to disagree with some of the opinions that I hear about bullying. One of the things I kept hearing about Chris Rock, the whole bullying was necessary to get him. I'm like, dude, you're funny. You're one of the greats. You would have got there without nobody bullying. Bullying you may have caused you to dig in your heels and be determined to succeed. Okay, it does that with a lot of people. But it is not necessary for you to have success. Don't buy into the thing of things having to be hard before you get there, before you can appreciate them, because they don't. All that does is enable people to keep giving other people a hard time. Okay? You're black enough like you are. Okay? Being black isn't all negative. It's only negative in a country where racism rules. My enemies are not winning. Some people my grandmother used to have a saying, and it goes like this: misery loves company. Many people want to give you a hard time in life because they've had a hard time. And having a hard time is so normal for them that to see anybody that isn't being given or appears not to, because I know from my own experience as a former hairdresser who used to talk to everybody and had everybody sharing their, because one common stereotype that happens to be true with hairdressers is we get to hear everybody's problems. People like to talk to us and bartenders. And so, because so many people are willing to tell you their problems, you hear a lot from a lot of people, all different ethnicities, all social backgrounds, wealthy, poor, you name it. And I will say one thing that is common for the human condition is we all have problems. We all have problems. And so to act like anybody is walking around here, money is just one, money or the lack thereof is only just one issue that you can have. And people who have money also have problems. They may not be looking at disconnect notices, and that depends on, and a large amount of whether or not you lose stuff depends on how you manage your money. Because people become wealthy and don't manage their money very well, and begin to lose their money. I remember comedian Louis Anderson being on Oprah Winfrey's show, and he said the only thing that separates him from his relatives that didn't have the money he does is that he had money and they didn't. He said that he said, I recognize that if I didn't have the wealth that I have, I could very easily be my family members. So to act like somebody is having it easier than you because they don't appear to have the struggles that you have, and decide to set yourself up as somebody that's going to, quote, even out the playing field by making their life harder than what it has to be, and calling another black person an Oreo is one way to do that. You don't know what that person has been through. I went to church with a woman who kept giving me a hard time, and the only thing that stopped me from giving her an emergency appendectomy with my tongue was the Holy Spirit telling me she's had a very hard background. And as she began to talk to me and we began to talk to each other more, I saw a lot of similarities in what she went through versus what I went through. Because even though my mother made good money and was able to well afford taking care of me in a good manner, I still went through things. I still went through things. I still went through things. The devil doesn't change because you have money. If anything, you multiply some of the demons that are against you, because now people see you have money and they want yours. Okay? And I used to see that with my mom all the time. I used to see it with my dad. My dad, made a decent living driving trucks. And once he started doing good financially, there were so many people who used to act like, well, he ain't gonna miss this. And people used to do that to my mom. Occasionally, I might have done it to either one of them when I was real young and didn't know any better. Okay? But, people want yours. Or you don't have money and people want to exploit you. Okay? Yeah. Because one thing that affects black women disproportionately is the amount of people who try to exploit us because of the whole wealth gap. So I'm saying we need to divorce this word from our vocabulary, because it really doesn't help race relations at all. It doesn't help us. Like I said, if I don't like a black person calling me this, I sure don't want a white person in my face. And I'm like Oprah. Whenever you, as a white person, decide to call a person by a slur, you have to keep in mind that because of your skin color, we don't see it the same. Okay, because of your skin color, because of how your predecessors did, we're likely, like I said, we see church burnings, we see school burnings, we could see cross burnings, we see white crosses, we see white sheets, we see night rides, we see 14-year-old boys who've been murdered. We see 4 little girls who got murdered in a church building because they blew up that church. Yeah, these are actual real cases that actually happened. Okay? Spike Lee did a film, I believe, on the 4 little girls. And the 14-year-old boy is in it too. So I already don't like that black people use the term Oreo, because it's really a way of saying black is inferior. As though we don't have a right to want better for ourselves. As though we don't have a right to want better for ourselves, to want to achieve wealth, to want to achieve success, to want to do better, to marry well, or any of that. So I'm feeling the Holy Spirit say enough. So I'm coming to the end of this particular episode. I will be doing another episode after this, and I think I'm going to talk a little bit more along this same theme of, encouraging us. Nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. Okay? Nothing wrong with not wanting to be poor. I've tried poor. I'm done with poor. When I can get, now let me say this, be careful what you do to achieve success. And I think that's what many people worry about, because many people have hurt other people trying to become successful. I think the next thing that I'm going to talk about is gatekeeping. But I'm going to go ahead and end this here. Where you see this podcast, you will be invited to comment. Comment, be respectful, don't be mean, and please don't bully me, because I don't take lightly to bullying. Okay? Let's keep our conversations respectful. We can disagree agreeably. We can disagree without tearing each other's heads off. We can disagree without harming one another. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. That's the sound of me blowing you a kiss. And I will talk to you on the next podcast.